put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cockacrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Cockacrow, dagabag, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. Inaga, jackass yard for fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Dale Baka, Kuma Kuma, even Lokunani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Dale Baka, Kuma Kuma, even Bangameri. Listen to this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. Them children glad when the weekend come. Out in the yard, them all gather round. Some a play catcher, some making house from straw. Two who come later, a grandma or grandpa. All a sit down just a wait. Moonlight so bright, it's just the right time to listen story or to say a little nursery rhyme. Grandpa voice a echo in the night as he tell some picnic are there with fright. Oh, Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Burra Nancy, even Watamuma. Oh, Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma Burra Nancy, even Watamuma. Yeah, man, that's the true story that tell the people about life in the country, life in the country.
We are talking of health services, so at the village level, we need to see these things reflected, right? And towards this end, I stumbled across what I can call a sustainable development exhibition. You know, it's along the road, a road in a rural district, the District of Wales. And this is an exhibition which my friend, Dr Simpson DaSilva, has on the road. If one should go into that neighborhood, you'll see lots of Saijan plants. Nowadays they're called moringa. You will see bits and pieces of wood, lots of drums, cans. He has been recycling and reusing, right? Refurbishing a lot. So and on these pieces of wood, you will find, let's say, notices, or these goals are highlighted, and mechanisms by which indicators as to how we can arrive at those goals. So I have with me today Dr. DaSilva. So he will go into those goals, so that, because in our attempt to get to that position of community development, we need to meet those goals so that the people within our communities can be safe at all times, because within the development goals, we are talking of safe health and all these good things, right? So I will welcome Dr. DaSilva, and Dr. DaSilva, please.
Thank you very much, Elton, for having me on your show this evening, and good evening to all the viewers wherever you are. The pleasure is mine to be working along with Elton McCray, my very good friend and neighbor in some way or the other.
Well, you see, the neighbor, the term in the village, everybody is either cousin, uncle, or neighbor, because I had neighbors living about half a mile down in the village, because my mother would say, go by neighbor George. And neighbor George is not 2 houses away. The George, in this case, there was also a neighbor George by me. But sometimes she talked about neighbor somebody, and this person is way, way down. I don't know if they were neighbors when she was growing up, but we grew up calling those persons neighbors. And as the Bible says, your neighbor is not necessarily the person next door to you, right? So in the villages, that's how we lived. It was either your cousin, your auntie, your uncle, your, what else we had? Cousin, uncle. No, all the people in the village, we had a way of addressing them, especially the elders. Was cousin Jane, auntie Margaret, cousin Egbert, and so on, right? So, and who wasn't your cousin or auntie was your neighbor. So when Simpson says neighbor Elton, he is from somewhere on the quarantine, Manchester, but we are still neighbors.
Correct.
Okay.
That is true. I'm from actually Lancaster, village on the quarantine coast, East. Currently have residence on the East Coast in Melanie, and also I have my operation in Wales, as he said, and I call it what you see in Wales on the roadside are the Sustainable Development Goals on lantern posts, and on any thing that I could have put my hand on to signal the fact that the goals belongs to everywhere, and the goals belongs to all of us. They are on the roadside, so it's on the roadway to prosperity, the roadway to sustainable development of our villages, communities, the roadway to the UN, because UN is the place that the people would be assembling in September, especially the heads of government, to really present and review where the goals are at this time. We are midway through the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, which have 169 targets, which technically are objectives, and then you have 232 indicators. Each community are supposed to be adopting those goals. Each community or each village are supposed to, at this time, because it's since 2015 those goals were introduced, and the goals supposed to be achieved by 2030, and we are 2023. So the UN is talking now about action to be taken with respect to the goals. an urgent action. But I'm saying to us that I am reminded by a good friend of mine who we taught together in the United States at Child Science Academy. And he always say you're supposed to test before you teach. You teach before you test. And for me, we're supposed to have that conversation. Elton may call it the Gyaaf, but let's relate it to now a conversation. And then after the conversation, or while we're having the conversation, we take serious action to solve problems within our heritage villages. And we use, in our case of we use African traditional methods to bring about these changes. Intra-Amerindian, Amerindian traditional methods, for the Asian traditional methods. So it's a cash ATM. And I'm saying to us,
conversation,
it is time,
action.
Which this cash is conversation, action, solution in our heritage villages through ATM, which is our African, Asian, or Amerindian traditional methods, coupled with modern technology. And that conversation must be happening now. We all, men, women, boys, girls, all should be internalizing these goals, which are 17. And it starts from number 1, which is
no poverty.
No poverty. There should be absolutely no poverty in our community, in our villages or communities. So when a leader or the government or private sector, anyone comes to our villages, they should be talking about the elimination of poverty as number 1 premise for the betterment of our community, for the prosperity of community. Then goal number 2, which is zero hunger. In other words, no one should go hungry. All should have access to healthy and nutritious, safe, and a balanced diet on a daily basis. Those are the kinds of things that are required, and it is mandated, it is accepted by all the presidents of Guyana, all the presidents all over the world, that those are things we'll do. Then you go straight to...
Before you come off of that, when you said balanced diet. I mean, in Guyana, we will buy for lunch some chicken, fried rice. Or we get some peas and rice and maybe a piece of fish on it.
Right, but
is that a balanced diet?
No, that is not a balanced diet. By balanced diet, it is meant that at least one should have 3 servings of vegetables per day and minimum 2 servings of fruits. A serving is a cup size, and we're supposed to make sure that in that diet, the various tastes that human being is accustomed to, which is sour, bitter, sweet, hot, and salt, has to be part of that meal. And then if you want to get a little bit more technical, you're supposed to have the colors of light included in that meal, which is remembered by Roy G. Biv: red, orange, yellow, green, and so on and so forth.
So in other words, you must have something green, something yellow, something red in your food.
In your food.
And that kind of thing.
Right.
So in that meal, you see some balanges, you see some okra, you see some pepper.
Correct.
Corilla.
A pinch of salt.
Pumpkin.
And a little bit of pepper.
Yeah.
And so on, as hot sauce. So you have that balance. But we must understand clearly that there's a thing called glycemic index, which determines the sweetness of the food or the sugar content. And we oftentimes would use a lot of sweet. In bread is sweet, rice is sweet, peas is sweet. So that is why you're supposed to have a mixture of the greens. The greens generally are bitter. Corilla, same, okra, they fall into the bitter category. So we have to make sure that, more importantly, that half of your plate at least should have the greens.
Okay.
There's a better wisdom that says 3/4, but let's settle for half, but not a whole big plate and a little bit of greens. And when you talk about balanced diet, it must be based on your religious background. In other words, if you're Muslim, Hindu, or Christian, whatever, supposed to be in that meal to balance your diet, it ought to be provided. So there's a responsibility of government, private sector, civil society, ordinary citizens to make sure that there are policies, programs, projects, and activities that would give an enable environment to cause each one in Guyana to have a balanced diet. That is why it is very important to have the kitchen garden going, or that in your homestead, to try to produce a lot of those kinds of foods that you need, and by extension of a family farm.
It's good you mentioned kitchen garden, because we know that there are quite a lot of what we call GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and a lot of the foods we have on the market, vegetables and even meats, are genetically modified. And according to some sources, they will tell you that those things are not as nutritious as the organically grown foods. So in terms of a balanced diet and these GMOs and organics, where do we stand?
My advice to us is to go towards organic. The world, the developed world, are craving for organic food. The GMOs, I would not necessarily advise that we should go in that direction. Guyana is blessed with organic soils, with organic streams, with organic resources, that if you spit on it, things will grow.
We have enough abundance of fertile soils.
Very fertile soils.
In other words.
So there's no need to import even the liquids to grow your hydroponics and so on. We could have what you call organoponics. We liquefy what we have naturally in Guyana to feed our plants. In other words, it's part of the whole food sovereignty and the whole food system, healthy food system that the world is craving and longing to have. We are blessed with that here naturally.
With good, with not going longer, then we'll have the third goal, which basically speaks to good health and well-being.
Good health and well-being.
Which again comes from eating good food.
Is directly linked to sustainable agriculture. So you would find that these goals are all interlinked, because you can show a man in Victoria or BV or Plaisance that if he were to cultivate his homestead, he can make a lot of money to save himself from having to buy food. Then he can plant enough to make a profit by rearing chickens or ducks and sheep and goat and some pigs. And that kind of money would bring him out of poverty if he were in poverty. So you see, from no poverty, you wouldn't be hungry, good health and well-being, because you make sure that you're, and I want to link sustainable production and consumption, which is another goal, that you make sure that you're not spraying your soils with carcinogenic chemicals that are harmful to the soil, the water, and the products that you would be producing.
Carcinogenic.
As in cancer-causing agents. In other words, a lot of the herbicides or the things to kill herbs.
The weed.
The weed.
Things that kill the bush.
Kill bush and so on. They're cancer-causing. So we ought to be resorting to natural means of control and not using these chemicals. They're mechanical means of controlling the weeds.
In other words, we can chop the bush with a cutlass or a weed whacker.
We can chop, we can weed whack, we could put plastic over it,
mulch,
or cardboard, we can mulch, and that would control
the weed. So we don't necessarily need to use these herbicides, these
various chemicals,
organophosphates to kill weeds, because as Dr. DaSilva indicated, many of them are carcinogenic and they are cancer causing. Many of the illnesses that we are seeing today, cancers, were not present in our great-grandfather's time. Or at least they couldn't diagnose it. I don't know which one, if they couldn't diagnose it or they were not present, but we are seeing many more people dying from things like cancer. And many of these cancers are related to the food we eat, which are impacted by the chemicals, the fertilizers, the weedicides that we apply to the soils. So we have to be careful as a people.
And just to add on that, as I would see sometimes, I speak to it, but it's important that we all be educated about it. Along the trenches, by the roadside, you see the people are spraying to control the weeds. That should be illegal. No one should be allowed to spray there, because that chemical goes into the waterway, kill the fishes, contaminate the water, contaminate
Before they kill the fishes, we catch the tilapia from those same canals and we sell it to our neighbors.
And that is wrong. It is not, and there are two goals that point to that. One is the fact that we're supposed to control things below water and control things above water. So we are violating those basic two goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda.
Now, the next one is quality education. This is a big one, quality education. What do you say of that?
We have, through the Sustainable Development Goals, a vehicle to be used to educate the people of our communities about their basic human rights. That's another thing.
First,
the Sustainable Development Goals are founded on basic human rights. In other words, we have the right to food and nutrition security. We have the right to prosper. We have the right to good health and sanitation. We have the right to quality education. And in Guyana context, free education.
Yes, we should be getting free education
Right.
now that we have oil.
Right.
There's no reason why. When we didn't get oil, we had it in the 70s.
We had it when we didn't have oil. Now we have oil money. There's no reason. So we can use the goals to educate our people. In other words, you need to have what you call sustainable education or green education in the school system, where the entire curriculum must be based on sustainability of our communities. And it's an opportune time for us to have what you call curriculum re-engineering or curriculum redesigning.
You know, when you said sustainable education, this is, in my mind, are we talking of education geared to making our communities self-sufficient as much as possible?
No, not
Are we talking of education to serve our communities? Because we know there was a time, and we have moved away from it some, where our education was geared towards just satisfying a colonial power. At independence, we changed our curriculum some, but still, the science we are taught at school, many of us cannot see a link between the things we learn in science, the physics and the chemistry, and applications within our communities. So our education should be more related to what is our environment.
Correct. I agree with you 100%. Our curriculum should be community-based. In other words, we have enough biodiversity. We have enough ecological environment, or we have enough plants and animals and human factor and natural resources
In other
within
words,
our communities.
to make
Those need to be used as the tools to teach the children about self-sufficiency within our communities.
How they treat their environment. You know, in other words, what we are saying is the child in Bartica should have a different his education should be oriented differently from the child on the quarantine or the child in Georgetown.
And then, but yes, I agree with that. So then what you have exchange visits of students to these various environments so they learn the entire
because
culture.
why I'm saying the child in Bartica should have, the child in Bartica is living in a mining environment where everybody is mining gold, diamond. So that child should learn how to deal with mining operations. He must understand mining. The child on the East Coast must understand the agricultural, how we can manipulate the soil to give him bora and pak choy and balanji.
Correct.
Right?
The child in Bartica must, just to add to what you're saying, must learn about the chemistry, the physics, the biophysics, the biochemistry of that environment.
Yeah.
They are there in these awesome, glorious rivers and falls. They must learn about the hydrology or the water science.
Yes.
They must learn about all the applications to their school environment, to the mining sector.
Yes.
In other words, you must have what you call show and tell. And when you're showing, you're speaking to the science, to the art, to the literature, to the English, to the mathematics, to the statistics of those things. So the learning becomes fun, exciting.
So in other words, the child on the coast, because our oil operation is on the coast, he must also learn about oil technology.
Correct.
Because he is likely to be faster, be engaged in that technology than the child in the Rupununi.
Correct. Agreed?
Right? So we need to start having our children geared towards the needs of the oil industry. As we see it around Georgetown and environments, there's quite a lot of construction. So our children need to be skilled in construction and not we have a contract going. The Chinese are going to build this East Coast Railroad along the embankment. How many Guyanese engineers will be engaged there? I mean, are we going to be 20 years from now still importing Chinese contractors, or shouldn't we have our local engineers building our roads to our satisfaction and specifications?
Well, that's why that comes in the importance of the local content of our entire economic development.
No, but it's all within the sustainable development,
I agree
quality
with you
education.
that in the school systems, we should have our engineers going in to work with the students through some mechanism of exchange. And at the same time, our engineer plus our students exposed to the local industries here, because they're our industries. And then the areas where the students may not be able to actually physically touch there, we use the technology, information communication technology, and have them in the environment virtually. Oh. So we have absolutely no excuse why that immediately that our attempt to bring quality education to all should be now. So that smart classroom doesn't necessarily only has to be through the technological advanced methodologies, but there are other methodologies that could be used that are as smart as that we call smart classrooms.
Now, number 5 is about gender equality. No, it has been one of the things where we have always had clashes in this society, where you're hearing she wants to be a tomboy, he wants to be what he's not made to be. And this kind. So gender equality, what specific is it referring to?
It is specifically referring to the fact that we all, if you're a boy or a girl, and I would like to piggyback on what you were saying about the boy and girl thing. If you remember, in our school system way back, typing was considered something for girls.
For the girls.
And
Cooking.
shorthand and cooking and all these things.
The boys
but unfortunately,
work.
the boys would work and metallurgy and so on, in other words, metals and so on. But we have come to realize that anyone can go into those fields. As a matter of fact, you have some female around the world who are mastering construction, who are experts at rehabilitating or restoring various...
I will make a point. In my engineering, well, the class was a big class, 100 plus students, but then you had what we call tutorial groups. In my tutorial group, we were 16, 15 girls,
and one man.
Me.
There was gender inequality there. So the world has long passed.
And this was way back in the late 70s.
Yes. And I was fortunate too, in my school in Cuba, I studied in Cuba, we had gender equality, but most times you had probably a little bit more female than males. And in Guyana here, in GSA, and some other environments, there was an attempt to make sure there's some gender balance. And also I remember clearly the time when there was a direct push towards making sure that be you a male or female, you can vie for all the different kind of jobs with same kind of pay. Mm-hmm. Not like how it used to be where males dominate and males get more pay.
When I went to UG 74, in the class of 64, I think there were 4 girls or 5 girls in our class of 64 there at UG, right? So, but now if you go to UG, that same engineering class, it's a bit different. And it's a trend now where we find at the tertiary level, throughout the Caribbean, more women are enrolled. And that's, there are several reasons. I'm not a sociologist. I will not try to get there. But there are reasons why it is so. But our boys seems to be lagging behind. So this gender equality thing at this point in time, I feel we should be trying to find out why our boys are not matriculating into universities, into the professions as much as our girls.
Right, and that is a challenge for us as leaders to go into the school system, go into the churches, the masjids, and various organizations, and make a deliberate effort, a special effort to change that. Because what we have found, based on the studies, the goals in many countries and in Guyana also are not, we are retrogressing, we're going backwards. And there must be a deliberate, a purposeful attempt, especially in minority communities or African Guyanese communities, to deliberately cause a shift or a transformation and an appeal to our people to do or to seize opportunity to do what is right, which is to get involved, to participate in advancing vocational education, formal education.
Vocational education, I see it as not being only necessary in the schools, because we have had situations, as they say in the education environment, many of the people who left school have fallen through the cracks. Mm-hmm. We have many youths out there, young people out there, who are not suited for the job market. Because as I said last time, there is a demand for people with the coming of oil, construction needs a lot of skilled personnel. The oil industry itself needs personnel. And we do not have those skills available. And our school system will not be turning out enough in a short while. So we need to look back at those who would have left the school system and can possibly be retrained or trained to fill these jobs. And we need to establish facilities, put mechanisms in place to have them trained. And this can be done at the community level.
And that's precisely why we say that the goals, sustainable development goals, are supposed to be internalized, personalized, to bring a life alive within the community.
Yeah.
Not one goal or two goals, all the goals. And that is the kind of conversation that we need to have. And while we have these conversations, we take action. So we call on all of you who are listening, who are hearing, to take some kind of action within your household. As a matter of fact, personally, internalize these goals and then get your brothers, sisters, cousins, niece, nephew, friends, and so on to be part of this whole movement or campaign for sustainable development within your communities.
We have other goals which talk about clean water, we have housing, we have economic growth, decent work and economic growth.
On the issue of decent, I'm glad you paused at that, decent work and economic growth. We have come from a time in the past from 1621 along the way to now. But more importantly, before emancipation in 1834, where we had to work, especially Africans. Africans had to work for no pay. Africans were treated as subhumans. Fortunately, that changed when the village movement came into being and people were working and get paid, although they worked for 4 years apprenticeship when there was no need for apprenticeship because that's what they were doing all the time. But when they got their money, they worked and then they started to get some pay and they pooled those resources and bought villages. We are in those villages today.
Abundant
they bought plantations, mind you.
And created villages.
And created villages within those plantations and various communities as we know them now. And we are supposed to make sure we get decent work. Or we're supposed to create decent work. Or the government's supposed to have enabling environments for these decent work to be occurring and get pay, good pay. Now, our challenge, especially in Guyana now, from what I understand, we're in the world's fastest growing economy. Some say next year. I know last year, last at one time, per capita, we were. Even now, we are. We are blessed that we have less than 1 million people. I like to challenge us and the government and the private sector and civil society to make sure that we have everyone in Guyana employed, irrespective of race, irrespective of religion, irrespective of party affiliation, that everyone should be employed. And we have the opportunity to make sure that every Guyanese become very prosperous and create this model country, this model community, especially like with all these resources, financial resources that are coming our way. So this question of decent work and economic growth, it is for all of us. It is not for a few who support a specific party and so on.
I have a different view, slightly different view.
Let me hear you.
I would say the environment must be so created that because the task may be, like for instance, we still need to get rid of bushes to do agriculture. We still need to till the soil to do agriculture. So when we talk of decent work, We're not talking of a man going with a cutlass or and a fork to approach the lands. I'm talking a mechanized operation. A man goes into a piece of equipment and clean the field.
Right.
The same man turn back with another piece of equipment and till the soil. It's decent.
A matter of fact,
and its productivity will be much higher.
right.
Right? So we still have, so you're still into agriculture, but you're not doing what our great-grandparents were doing. We are involved in activities which is different but with the same end goal.
Matter of fact,
before you come in, but also I'm saying we don't have to be working with someone, we work with ourselves. Or we come together and create work for ourselves in cooperatives. And we employ, so it's not that someone will come and give us a job. The days for that are no longer tenable. Because we need to chart our own courses, especially in our communities.
I couldn't disagree with you. I agree with you in that is what we ought to be doing. And we ought to be doing that now, especially in the realm of agriculture. Agriculture or sustainable agriculture is connected to everything. It's connected to the pharmacy industry. It's connected to the transportation industry. It's connected to the information communication technology. It's communication to all those decent work that one can get in any field. It's linked to everything you could think about. So the challenge to us is to start immediately by creating mechanisms to be employed or to be self-employed within our environment. But when I speak about the holistic position in terms of governance in a local environment, we ought to make sure that that governance takes everything into consideration and it is done properly.
There is one other that I would like to hear your thoughts on. Reduce inequalities.
Well, on the question of the reduction of inequalities, where you have some people are given greater preferences than others, and because of the rights of all of us to enjoy all those goals, then when you come to a community, all those goals should be put as part of the community or village plan. In that way, it would be equal treatment be meted out to all individuals. In other words, you leave no one behind in the process of the sustainable development. As a matter of fact, you go to the ones who are farthest away or farthest behind and bring them up to scratch so that they can progress as a people and prosper. In other words, it's prosperity for all on equal footing, irrespective of what?
Okay, we are nearing to program time. No, this discussion is really, we were really taken away because it's nearing to program time, and we did not say about the people who are sponsoring us. No, we have our sponsor. Oh yes, the logo is up there. Daily Bread. That is the baker shop all the way at Cursin Park in LBI. And as you all know, I'm a member of ACTA, and we will have our Emancipation Festival on the 1st of August. Come join us at the National Park, and let's Gyaaf, because out there we will have all sorts of activities that you can participate in. We'll have the Morgan Heritage will be on stage. We'll have Stone Boy from Ghana, and that is for entertainment, but then we'll have all sorts of foods, kanki, mitai, all the we'll have you will have the opportunity to play games, and you will see some of the history of our villages. This year we are focusing on the history on the village of Bachelor's Adventure, where the 1823 revolt, the massacre of the 1823 revolt happened. So we'll focus on that. And the 200th anniversary of the 1823 revolt, the celebration, well, the commemoration activities will kick off in August, and as I said 2 weeks ago, it will continue for the next year. So look out for the notifications, and until then, we say, continue the Gyaaf, and our brother, as brother said, the conversation, right? Whichever one you prefer, the Gyaaf or the conversation is the same thing, but we need to be involved in it.